And next up is our game review. Shall we get into it, Paul?
Let's do it.
Paladins of the West Kingdom is out right now, so it's a 2019 release. The designers are Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald, and the artist is Mikhailo Dmitrievsky. Published by Renegade Game Studios. It plays 1 to 4 players, 90 to 120 minutes, which of course means 120 to 150 minutes.
As it does.
These guys did Raiders of the North Sea. They did Architects, which we reviewed previously. And their games all look similar. They have a similar aesthetic and a similar kind of design. But let's talk about what this game specifically is saying that it is. This is supposed to take place in West Francia in 900 AD. And despite recent efforts to develop the city, outlying townships are still under threat from outsiders. Saracens scout the borders, Vikings plunder, even the Byzantines have shown their darker side. And as noblemen and women, we're going to gather the workers to defend our cities against their enemies. We're going to build fortifications. We're going to spread faith throughout the land. And we are not alone in this thing. We got the Paladins who are going to help us out. So this is a victory point salad game in which there are tons of different ways to earn victory points. And there are basically 3 economies in the game. Economy number 1 is money. Lots of different actions are going to cost money. Second one is provisions. Some actions do not cost money. They cost provisions instead, and you're going to have to use that. And the third most important economy is people. There are lots and lots of little meeples that you will be gathering at the beginning of the game, and you will be taking actions that sometimes will give you more of them that are of several different colors. The white are the peasants. The peasants have nothing special about them. Any place that doesn't specify what color you need to go on, a peasant can do it. The black pieces are the clergy, and there are some actions like pray, for instance, absolve, things like that, commission, that require a clergy member to be taking that action with you. Green are scouts, blue are traders, fighters are reds, and then there is the purple. Purple is special. Purple are thieves, and they can imitate anybody else. So they're sort of wild cards.
Wild cards. Thieves.
Interesting things about the game. The player mat that is before you is the size of the entire shared player board that is out there. In fact, there is no one player board. There are 2 small, thin, long player boards that generally go side to side, and they'll look like a runway, essentially. One part of them is where the cards that the round cards, the game is played over 7 rounds, go, and the other part is areas of the kingdom which have spaces that when you place a piece out there, you'll be placing either a monk who is coming to bring the faith to the land, or a garrison, which is the military coming in there and locking down that land. And each one of these spaces has certain advantages, bonuses you're going to get for going there. But the main motion of the game, the main actions of the game, are taking these little pieces that you've got, these little men, and you're going to be playing them on your own player board. There is no place on the main board, at least in the start of the game, for you to place any pieces. So you would say that it's worker placement.
The way I would say it, think of it as Orleans.
Sure.
Yeah, that's basically how I view the setup. You have your board. You're going to have a number of, like in Orleans, you have like discs, but like in this, you'll have you'll wind up picking a number of meeples, and you'll be placing them, and eventually you'll have enough of an engine that you can place on the other boards.
Sure. So there are actions such as develop, which allows you to take a little house and you can put it on another part of your own player board, turning an action that requires 3 people to suddenly only requiring 2 people. There are actions of hunt and trade, which allow you to get more of those provisions or more of that money. Game of recruit, where you can recruit some cards that are available on the main board, which are friendly villagers that will give you little bonuses. Sometimes you can either get bonuses that are one time or bonuses that extend for the rest of the game. The prey action is an interesting one. When you take the prey action, you pay a little bit of money and you remove all of the pieces from one of the places where one of the actions you have already taken. Those pieces go back into the main supply, so you don't get to use them again, but it does open up that space to be used for a second time. Conspire will turn any color piece into a purple piece. Remember, purple are the thieves, and they can imitate any other piece. By doing that, they are tremendously valuable, but they come at a cost, because when you take a thief, you have to also take a suspicion card.
Dun, dun, dun.
Suspicion cards, the mechanic is fairly simple. When you turn over a suspicion card, it will either grant you 0, 1, or 2 taxes from a little tax pool, which can range from 5 taxes to 8 points worth of taxes. Those taxes are basically money. They're just money that you're going to get and be able to use. The trick is that when that tax pool is empty, it triggers a little Inquisition round. The Inquisition round is super simple. Everybody counts up how many of those purple suspicion cards they have. Everybody that has the most suspicion cards is going to be able to get rid of half of them, rounded down. So if you have 3 cards, you only get rid of 1. If you have 4, you get rid of 2. And it will allow you to take a debt card. A debt card is -3 points at the end of the game, but there's good news. There are actions where it is possible to repay that debt. And if you do, you flip that card over, and it becomes +1 point instead of -3 points.
Yay. That's as a person who keeps on doing that in the game, it's not a winning strategy.
Well, I think it is to some degree. I think it's a wrong strategy in this game to not do that at all.
Exactly.
But I think it's also a really bad strategy to get too much of that, because the number of actions you are spending to mitigate the bad things that you've done becomes, the juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
Wow, that's a great way of saying it, Tom. I wish this podcast talked more about that one specific saying.
So, great things about the game. So, let's talk about the central actions that you are taking. I talked about some of the more minor things you did, but the way you're going to score points is by doing 6 main things to help your kingdom. Okay, commission is taking these little monk pieces that are on your board and putting them out in the land and converting the faith. What you're essentially doing by doing that is you are uncovering spaces. Whenever you take that monk off, you're uncovering a blue space, and a blue space means you're going to move up 1 on a track. You have 3 different, what would you call them, attributes?
Sure.
That each player has.
Like you got prestige, you have
faith, and you have strength.
Yeah.
Right. Strength is for military. Faith is for converting people and keeping the faith, and prestige is how much people respect you. All these start at 0. But we're going to have paladins that will affect that. They'll give us temporary boosts and these sorts of things. When you get up to the top of the chart of those things, like 12 points, the 12-point space is worth 20 points at the end of the game. If you get any one of those 3 attributes to 12 points, you're going to get 20 points. 11 is only going to get you 16. 10 is only going to get you 13. You get down to 7, and you're all the way down to 6 points. So this is heavily weighted to the top of the scale. So what you want to be doing is taking actions whereby you are going to be moving these metrics up and up and up and up and up as much as you can. But there's a trick to it. The game is kind of designed pretty well so that you cannot only move up 1.
Exactly. You're kind of restricted to a certain balance. Like, you need to have a certain amount of prestige in order to get a certain amount of faith. And faith, and there's a calculus to it, but like you kind of have to move at least 2 together, but generally 3. So it's fairly balanced. It prevents a runaway situation.
I've done pretty well with focusing on 2 and moving up the 3rd one only as much as is necessary to get the other 2. To describe it, moving these monks out by the commission action, moving them out unlocks a blue space. So you're going to move up the prestige track. By putting these monks out in the villages, you are upping your prestige. But where you can put these monks is limited to how much faith you currently have. If your faith is at 0, you can only put your monk on one of the first 3 spaces in the lands area. And once those spaces are full, guess what? You can't put out a monk until your faith is higher. Another one, absolve. Absolve is kind of the opposite. It is when you take an absolve action, you're unlocking a faith move. So you're going to move up 1 on your faith. But then the action that you take from that is going to generally help you. How would you put it? You can only unlock an absolve action if you have the proper amount of prestige in order to do that. and you'll get a little bonus. All of these things give a little bonus. Bonuses like get rid of one of those suspicion cards that you have, or pick up a white guy, and so you have another worker that you can use, or a different color worker. Sometimes there'll be pieces which says grab one of the villagers who will benefit you for the rest of the game, and you don't even have to pay him, so you get him for free. Take 2 coins, various actions along those lines. And the thing is that there are 6 of these. Commission is putting the monks out. Absolve is basically moving these jars around on your board and filling up spaces. Fortify is drawing from a wall deck and building a wall at the top of your player board. Attack is there are going to be these, in addition to those villagers that we described, those nice and friendly villagers that are available to you, there are also going to be these outsiders, and there's going to be a list of 7 outsiders that are going to be available each and every round. Barbarians and thugs and...
Yeah, so they're outsiders, so let's go kill them or let's convert them. Those
are the only 2 options. It is murder them or... And by the way, and the paladin that you start with each round, let's talk about the paladin before we get too much farther. The paladin is really going to be what is going to dictate what you want to focus on this round. You have a deck. Everybody has an identical deck of 12 paladin cards. You're going to shuffle them up, and you're going to deal 3 to yourself. One of them you're going to flip up on your player board, and that is the paladin paladin du jour. It is the paladin you have this round. The other 2, one you're going to put on the top of the deck, and one you're going to put on the bottom of the deck, meaning one of them you're going to possibly say, I think that might be a really good paladin to take next turn, and that'll be one of the 3 cards you draw next turn. The paladins themselves have a couple things. First of all, they have a temporary power. They have a temporary level of 1 or 2 traits. So one paladin might have a temporary prestige of 3 and a temporary faith of 2. That means that even if all of your things are down at the bottom and at 0, right now for this round, you've got a prestige of 3 and a faith of 2, and you can take actions as though you have those things. Second thing is they have 2 people on their thing. They have 2 vassals that sort of come with them, and they will specify that color. So this particular paladin, you're going to get a red guy and you're going to get a white guy, right? You're going to get a fighter and a peasant or whatever, or something like that. And then the third thing is at the bottom of the card, it says your one little game-breaking power that you have for this round and this round only. For instance, with commissions, when you put these monks out into the land, you have to pay provisions for them. The first 3 monks cost only a single provision. The next 2 cost 2 provisions, and the last 2 cost 3 provisions each to put them out. That can be very, very draconian and very, very expensive. So it'd be really great if you play the right paladin at the right time and says you can commission monks and put them out there and have to pay no provisions. That sort of thing will happen. So with that, some of these guys are good at murder, right? They'll be good at the attack action.
They're not good at. They'll pay you. They'll give you like attack.
It's true. That's right.
They'll give you and get $2. So,
yeah, bounties.
That's right. Exactly. So yeah, no, it all works out. The powers make sense with the game. There's nothing out extraordinarily like OP about any of the powers. They just make it convenient and they steer you into a direction where you will probably want to maximize that.
Yes.
For that round.
And it's a fun puzzle. It really, really is. It is interesting. I have the 2 guys from my paladin. There will be these in cards that we will choose one of in turn order, and that will give us another 4 people that will go into our stack. So we'll have 6 workers to work with each and every round of the game. From a previous round, you can reserve up to 3 that you don't use that round, so that you can use them in the next round. So that's your army, and that's what you can use. And these action spaces require anywhere from 1 to 3 workers to activate these spaces. So how do I best use these? How do I best do this? Like, okay, for instance, I'm using the paladin this turn that allows me to fortify without having to pay provisions. I can build walls really well. So maybe the first action I'm going to do is I'm going to do a develop action, and I'm going to put a house on the fortify space. So now the fortify action only requires 2 workers instead of 3. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the fortify action, and I'm going to take that. But then I don't want to just use it once if I can possibly avoid it. So, I want to go to the prey action so I can pull those guys off and I can use Fortify for a second time in this round. But there's a problem. Prey requires a black piece. It requires a cleric, and I do not have a cleric. So I'm going to have to go to Conspire first, and I'm going to have to turn him into a thief, and a thief can be anybody. So then he'll be able to go prey. And you're trying to create these really interesting combinations of actions, and it really does work very, very well. There's a whole bunch of things to take in and to focus on. Your first game can be a little daunting in terms of the ways these systems interact.
There'll be a point where you go like, oh, I did this all wrong. Let's start over, and I know how to play now. And it's totally fine. It's not punitive. Like, it's like for when I first played the game with Tom and Jennifer, there was a point where it goes, oh, I'm doing so well, and they go, oh, I am not doing well. I have really neglected this aspect. My game is completely stalled. But like within 2 rounds, I was able to unstall it and not win. But but it was, I did fine, and so it's not that bad. You just have to recognize the rhythm of the game. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to rhythm again. Like, do you know what you need to do? And one play, half a play will tell you the rhythm, and then you'll know how to play the game.
Do you feel like you're a paladin of the West Kingdom? Do you feel like you're cleaning up the thing? Does the theme mean anything to you when you're playing, Paul?
It's really interesting because I was thinking about this, and the answer for me is no. But the way I tend to abstract games like so far for all games that it's really hard for me to be.
You abstract Dune.
That is one of the few I don't, because but I love the IP so much. Like, whereas this, I don't necessarily feel like I'm a paladin. Like, I feel like this is like, hey, I'm putting meeples down, I'm getting stuff, I'm beating Tom, I'm not beating Tom. That's how my brain works.
Is that the theme of every game?
When we're playing.
I think the theme is okay. I think it's okay. I think it all makes sense what you're doing. When I am putting a monk into the world out there, into the kingdom, I know what he's doing and I get it. When I put a garrison out, I know what that is. When I'm attacking one of these outsiders, I totally get it. When I've converted an outsider and now he's working for me and gives me a bonus at the end of the game, I get that as well. I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty solid. I think all of these games are kind of in that middle place, exactly. Right? They're not the most noteworthy in terms of theme, but I think they all have a slightly different theme to each other that fits the era that they're working in.
The way that I would describe it for me, my reaction to it is like the artwork is very compelling to the point where I don't mind just doing all this stuff. Even though it's not, the theme isn't connected for me personally, because it just feels light and fun and like, hey, we're doing stuff together.
Right.
So I feel like the artwork is really good for all the architects the same way. Like, I feel like it hits the right tone for what the game is. That's why I think these 2 games, or I haven't played, what's the other one? The North Raider?
Raiders of the North Sea.
Yeah, I haven't played that, but between Paladin and Architects, I feel the artwork has a really interesting synergy with the style of gameplay. I feel like
I understand what you're saying. It fits what it is. It's sort of giving you these small little clues as to this is the kind of game it is, right?
Yep.
It's definitely not saying this is a huge, heavy game that is super inaccessible.
Yeah.
But it's also not saying this is,
it's like elevated welcoming. Like, it's a little harder than welcoming, but like, it's you're like, oh, okay, I can get this. I feel like this is if this was my gateway game to Euros, I think that I would totally go, oh my God, there are so many things you can do with games that I had never considered from Monopoly or whatever. And I think that this is where the space of this game lives. Like, this whole brand lives. I feel like it's a elevated plus, not elevated, like entry plus.
Yeah, and listen, playing the game is fun and tense in a lot of ways. I need a purple guy because if I have a purple guy, I can do all of these things that I can't do without it because I just don't have this one color that I need. But taking that purple guy takes a suspicion card, and now I'm going to have the most suspicion cards, which means I'm going to get debt the next time this bank runs out, and I'm going to be in big trouble. And then there are other things where I've been busy building my wall until I realize, oh, in order to build my wall any further, I have to have a really high prestige, and I haven't done anything to raise my prestige. What am I going to do? Oh my goodness, now I have to do conversion or commission or attack. I have to do, and each one of these actions, in trying to do that action to get points so you can do the other action, eventually gets to a point where you can't do that action because you need the third metric to be raised. That is fun. That is a fun kind of balance where you're trying to push the game and the game pushes back and says, no, it requires a little bit more harmony. You got to think this through a little bit more. And that's fantastic.
That's the space where I think it lives is great. Like, for a person who's not very versed in this type of balancing, I think this forces you to go like, oh, there's a consideration that I've missed, and then the mechanisms are not so inaccessible that you couldn't adjust it mid game. That's why I like about this game. I don't think. It's not my preference. It's like Indian food for me. I'm not a big Indian food. I'm throwing all this stuff out there. Like,
Wow, Paul, you're really good.
No,
I feel like I need to charge you for therapy today.
That's right. And so I think Indian food is fine. But I'll never recommend it. That's how I feel about this game. I go, if someone were to bring it out, we're going to play this. I go, okay, I'm totally fine with it. But it's never something that I personally will choose. But I recognize its craft.
Are you hearing a lot of butts here? Are you hearing a lot of... Does it feel like another shoe is going to fall? Because it really is. All right. So the first things I said about this game is that your player board is equal to the size of the entire shared board for everybody else. That was a red flag for me. I was like, I haven't seen this. Why haven't I seen this? Oh, it's because it sort of tells you, the real estate tells you the focus. And your focus in this game is heads down. You are staring at your board. Look, a worker placement game in which none of the spaces that you're placing your worker are blockable, in which almost every, and not every, because that main central board that has the 7 cards that mark the 7 rounds of the game, or actually 8 cards for 7 rounds. There's a little hiccup in there. But some of those cards, the last 5 of those cards, are actually action spaces that only one person is going to be able to grab. And the issue is that except for those, everything you're doing is on your own board. It is unblockable, and that means it's also unaffected by the other players of the game. The amount of times when there is actual player interaction is very, very light in this game. Occasionally, somebody will put a monk or a garrison on the spot that you wanted to claim. Occasionally, somebody will murder or convert the outsider that you wanted to murder or convert. But other than that, there really isn't much of anything.
Well, did you have that problem with Orleans? Because I feel like this is the exact same, setup.
I don't think it really is. I mean, it's similar.
You have your own personal board. You put stuff on your board that no one can affect. And there are secondary boards that you adjust. And sometimes you can deny this person this.
Well, those adjustments are more substantive than they are in this.
And
by the way, truth be told, I'm not a huge fan of Orleans.
Yeah, there you go. I think that is a true statement. You are not.
Yeah, let's break it down. So there's a couple other niggling complaints. We don't need to get to them. They're not major. I think that look, this is a game where everybody is exactly the same at the start. You're drawing your 3 paladins, and which paladin you choose to play affects how your game goes. But your games don't divert
absolutely
much from each other, which means it becomes a game where it's a game of inches, where my play of this, where I got this tiny little advantage over you, is all that's going to be between me and you in the game in a lot of cases. So it makes little imbalances magnified.
There's a compounding interest to that.
Yes.
Effect, compound effect.
So if the wall building, for instance, is a little bit better than the other 6 actions, which are all built to be essentially balanced, that's a problem. If attack, when you're attacking these people, requires less resources and requires less planning in order to do it, which it does, that is an imbalance as well. When you have a situation where every time you take a Conspire card, that Conspire card is either going to give you 0, 1, or 2 money in a game that is extremely tight on money, that is an imbalance.
See, like the things that you were saying, I absolutely agree with. At the same time, my interpretation of those things are different. Like I see all that and I go like, well, that's the fog of war of the game. You know, like this game is not meant to be taken. You're not going to play a tournament of Paladins. That's not. It's not really designed for that. I feel like it's designed for. This is a gateway game for between heavier Euros and concepts of heavier Euros and people who have not newbies. And I think like in that space, like I said, it really does well. I'm not a person who, like I said, it's Indian food for me. So I'm like, I think Architects is a better game for me. I know you have some differing opinions.
I don't love that either, but I do like it better in the sense that it is more. There is more interaction with other players.
Absolutely.
I played with Matt. I will be the voice of Matty here and say that he disagrees. He likes this game very much, and he had to do a little bit of looking inwards and said, you know what? I don't mind low interaction games. I kind of like low interaction games.
And here's where it comes down to. Like I look at this game and I think of my wife, who happens to be like Matt, and they're both introverts. And so what they can both do is sit in a room with you and read a book for like 4 hours, walk out of the room and go like, oh my God, I'm sure glad we got to spend so much time together. I'm going like, what the hell just happened?
And here's the problem. I played 2-player with Matt, and at the end of the game, I looked up and I was surprised that he was in the room. I was like, oh, wow, you were here?
Yeah, no.
No, in reality, I told him that I said, I don't think, he was saying, no, there's more player interaction than you're giving it credit for. There's more going on. We played a 2-player game, and it wasn't until the very last round of the game where he did something, and I looked up at him and I said, Matt, that is the first time you have done something that has forced me to do anything different than what I was going to do. And that is, I'm going to say it, I think that's bad. I don't think that is different.
Now who is dropping the bomb?
Yeah, I don't think it's, well, here. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, when Euro games first came on the scene, Ameritrash gamers, or the people that have been playing all these games for all this time, said it is multiplayer solitaire, that was a slam. That was a slam. It is multiplayer solitaire. You're not even competing against each other. What they meant is it is not take that. It is not face-to-face confrontational. And in some cases, it was. Look, listen, there's a spectrum, right?
Absolutely, a spectrum.
Auction mechanics are very interactive.
That's right.
They're very, very confrontational. We talked about that a couple weeks ago with Dimitri, right? Worker placement on a board that everybody is sharing, and by me taking that action, you cannot take that action. I have to say that it is not what Ameritrashers think of as the most interactive, but when my pieces are attacking, when my army units are attacking your army, or vice versa, I do not feel the dread and the pain as much as when you took the 4 wood that I desperately need to build the next room on my wood house. To me, that is incredibly interactive. But I realize it's not as interactive, right? There are games where there are men on the map, and men on the map can have a lot of play. When we talked about Tapestry just a few weeks ago, we talked about how the size of the map meant that there was very little, even though it was men on a map, there was very little player interaction because
there's very little need for player interaction.
Correct. You have to go out of your way to do it. Right? It's not something that that the game is going to, listen,
push towards.
Yeah, exactly. A knife fight in a phone booth, right? It is not it is a knife fight in an arena. Right? And that's
it's a different tension.
Which scene would you want to watch in a movie?
I don't know. It depends on who I like. I would love to be the stalker, chasing the person running away from me. I love it's a slasher movie at that point.
It's a football stadium. You could go anywhere. It's going to take hours. It is one of those things. But at a certain point, so I think Euro games taught the earlier iteration of gamers that no, actually there is some nuance to player interaction that isn't just take that isn't just me smashing you in the face and you smashing me in the face, but rather the careful choice of what resources to take, of what actions to take, what to bid in an auction can have a tremendous effect on people's games, and yet give you some agency where it's not simply I roll this many dice and I see how many hits you get. That is a deeply, deeply interesting game experience, even though it is less interactive.
Sure.
But at a certain point, and maybe it is personal taste, but I have to say that I do think it is more than just personal taste. I think that there is at some point an axiom here that why are you playing board game with other people if nothing in the game is interacting with the other people? And of course, it is not nothing.
Sure,
absolutely. It is not nothing in this game.
Yes.
And the 4-player has more interaction than the 3-player. The 3-player has more interaction than the 2-player. But they're all really, really light on that, and they truly are largely multiplayer solo games to a significant degree. And I think that's wrong.
So to recap, and this is me just spinning it, this game has triggered you. It basically legitimizes what 4Xers accused Eurogamers of doing before. This is in your mind multiplayer solitaire. This does not elevate the that argument, and I don't disagree. Actually, I would say though there are many games, or at least there are games that play like multiplayer solitaire for a while. Like for example, one of my favorite games that I rarely play is Roads and Boats. And
sure.
it turns out, in the very beginning,
it is.
You're just on your own, and only after days of playing or whatever of playing, you go, oh, I could take his paper, and this will make my life a lot easier.
Okay. So I'm not going to get into a Roads and Boats story because we're running late already, but I will say it totally depends on who you play with.
Exactly.
There's
the option. So
if you were to play with Mark Now and Chuck Tolman and those guys, we are going after each other like
killing geese.
I am grabbing your one goose, so you can't make this, and so you can't do that.
Sure.
And we are spending the game takes forever because you're supposed to be spending these very limited resources you have in the game building roads and rafts and
exactly.
Paper mills and things like that, and instead all we're building is walls across each other's roads, trying to keep each other from taking our stuff. So it can play different ways. Look, you hear it. If you like those low interaction games, if you play Tapestry and you really like it, I consider that to be a surprisingly low interaction game. This might be a really good game for you because everything we said positive about it, and there's a lot positive to say about this game, is still absolutely true. But at the end of the day, it is not, the juice is not worth the squeeze for me. It is not worth the squeeze for me because I am not playing against you. My actions have nothing to do with any other player there. And that is a fundamentally less interesting experience than it would otherwise be. And I do think some of the design decisions are not very good. The first special card that only one person can access, one of the few times when a person could take an action that somebody else might want to take, happens in the third round of the game. It happens in the third round of the game in a 2-player game, in which case the start player who already has an advantage gets another advantage by being the first person to access that card. It happens in a 3-player game where it should happen because the last player then gets the advantage, but it also happens in a 4-player game in which the fourth player is kind of left out. I would say that we are in a place in the design space of our hobby where we are standing on the shoulder of giants, where we are taking great game designs and we're making them better and better and better. I will say the early designers in the 90s knew how to do what they have not done in this game, which is they've noticed mathematically that we need to make sure that we create this little situation where the last player gets this, is the first person to do this and gets that gets that benefit, where because everything is so tight, because everyone has the exact same starting position and the exact same actions to take, that we have to balance these 6 strategies out. I don't think that they've entirely done that in this, and that's a sad thing, because earlier designers were meticulous about that.
Like from my perspective, and we can end it with this, like, I think this hits a tone. I think it achieved what it's trying to do. It's not what I like. Don't misunderstand me. But I will say that I feel like they achieved what they're going for. And I think there is a market for a type of gamer who enjoys this tone and this level. So maybe try it out at your local board game shop and see for yourself. Like, you may or may not like it. It's not everyone's cup of tea.
And if you're a light interaction gamer, if you know that doesn't bother you at all, you very well might love this game. That was Paladins of the West Kingdom, published by Renegade Game Studios, and should be available just about everywhere, just about now.